this episode of Wanted, a Midlife Hobby, we're going to stretch our bodies and our minds and learn more about what it takes to do yoga. We're going to start by talking with Marilyn Zavidow, a registered yoga teacher based in Connecticut, who's also the founder of Zavidow Creative. And hello to Marilyn Zavidow. I am so happy to have my old friend on with me today to talk about my next foray or my next exploration of a potential hobby. This time, I will say doing yoga, and I'll use yoga as the generic term because I know there's a lot more to it, and I'm hoping that we'll get a really good opportunity to explore that a little bit today. I am curious. I've got to start out with the main question, Marilyn. How did you get started with yoga in the first place?
Well, I just want to say that I'm really happy to be having this conversation with you, my dear friend, from a long time. Okay, and I do want to change the way you the verb that you use from doing yoga to practicing yoga.
Excellent.
Just a little segue here.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Okay. About 13 and a half years ago, I had never practiced yoga before, and I lost the love of my life, and I was in kind of everything had fallen apart for me. My heart was broken. I was at the beginning of my grieving journey, and so it sort of cracked me wide open. And I wanted to, in fact, seems odd when I look back on it. Kind of odd is that I wanted to communicate with him in the great beyond, whatever that beyond was.
Gotcha.
And my mind was screaming with all the things that were going on inside of me emotionally and mentally. And I said, well, if anybody's going to get through to my brain, I guess I better clear my mind, or else, because they're not going to be calling me on the phone. Somehow or other, he's going to communicate with me in some way that is in my mind, in my heart, that I will know it's just not me talking to myself. So I better clear my mind. And that's when I said, well, what does that mean? Well, I think that means meditation.
Okay.
So I went on I did the research. I went on a 5-day meditation retreat, Vipassana insight meditation. And then I'm already in a different world. I'm already, because by what was my original intention, all of a sudden opened up the experience that I had, this great calming in the midst of the storm of my life. All these what is this world? What is this world that I've heard about, but I've never participated in? And so I was open, and I went back to the sports club that I was doing, weights and things like that. And through the window of their studio room, there were people who were practicing yoga. And I looked at it and I said, I don't know what this thing is. I've heard about it. I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. So let me try it. I used to be limber, I can do this. So I took a couple of classes, and this is really interesting, because this is what sort of, every yoga class is very different. And so we're going to talk about that. I want to talk to you about how different the approaches can be for you as you explore this. But so at the very end of a yoga practice, there's this rest period called Shavasana, and it's with an S. It's pronounced the sh, but it's Savasana. Okay. And at the very end, you lie flat on your mat in what they call the corpse pose, which I hate. You call it something else, but your resting pose. You're on your, whatever way is comfortable for you. Most people on your back. And you rest. You're integrating everything that's happened before. Okay. And at that very end of the practice, with all the inner holdings and everything that I've had, after that practice, I would be on this mat in this rest position, and tears would stream down my face. I wasn't like sobbing and interrupting everybody, but it was like this great opening of this emotion. It was like this letting down. It was this flowing that came out as tears. And I felt, like kind of calmed and soothed as a result of doing it. And that's when I understood that yoga was more than I had ever expected, looking through the window at the studio in the gym that was basically about, kettlebells and pulley things. Wait.
Gotcha.
That's how it started. And then I continued to do it, and I continued to practice and with different teachers and different experiences. And it got larger and larger in my life, and I became more and more understanding and experiencing it.
Now, I know, and that makes sense to me in a lot of respects, because I know you're a very spiritual person, and I know people define spiritual in a lot of different ways. I don't want to try to define it for anybody or even for you, but one of the questions I guess I wanted to kind of check in with you is, I'll try to figure out how to word this the right way. If you think of a spiritual scale of 1 to 10, I mean, does yoga kind of max out at this is the most spiritual kind of experience ever, or does it help you get there? Is there, maybe I'm over assuming, maybe it's just, do you consider yoga to be that potential kind of spiritual experience?
Well, there's a word that you just use, is potential.
Okay.
When one uses the term yoga in our culture, in the American culture, when we actually do yoga in a studio again, because we've been, doing, well, whatever. Okay. So, this is a very significant point. And I'm going to tell a story that one of my teachers told me, that in our society, I call, the yoga about doing all this stuff, I call it yoga size.
Okay.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And so here's the story that one of my teachers told me about, that he had heard from one of his teachers. I said that to practice yoga is like being in the most advanced jet plane in an airport. It's got this huge engine, okay? Mm-hmm. And you can taxi around the field and anywhere you want and go at amazing speeds and maneuver and all these kind of things on the ground. However, the plane was meant to fly. So you have a choice. And the spiritual aspect of how it can help you, and the teachings of yoga, which are about life, about existence as a being, are what the potential of having you fly from the ground of the physicality of it to understanding yourself and life and other dimensions, which I honestly, I may be a star child, but I haven't, I got a lot to go before I'm just pure energy floating around, which I like to be.
Yes.
So that's it. I mean, so yoga means, is practiced in many different ways. And it has a huge potential for the individual to experience themselves and their lives in ways that are good and insightful, because there are teachings that go along with it.
We might be even been thinking the same direction, because my natural reaction, you said, yoga can influence, this other parts of life. Well, how has yoga influenced other parts of your life?
Well, there are very different yoga classes. Okay. So when I talk about like yoga size, it typically, and I know I got a bit of an attitude about that. So for those people who do yoga size who may be listening here, sorry, go with, do what serves you in your life. Okay. And there are some classes where the teacher will immediately say, oh, you'll do a sort of a centering, calming down, and then you move immediately into body movements and things like that. Other teachers approach it from the more spiritual perspective, from the teachings, and they will do a little talk in the beginning or speak from their heart about something and refer to teachings, because there's a vast wisdom that's been written down by the great teachers that are about, the 8 limbs of yoga. Okay. Ashtanga. There's actually a practice called Ashtanga 8 limbs, but and these 8 limbs are all part of the fullness of yoga. And the first two are the yamas and the niyamas. Okay. And they are like the 10 commandments. They're practices of life. The first five, the yamas, are about, the universal practices of how to live rightly in this world, in any world in the universe. Okay. And the first one and then the second ones are about personal observances that you as an individual can practice to enhance your life and the doingness of your life. Okay. So, and not if I use the thing that like the 10 commandments, the very first yama is ahimsa. Ah means no, himsa means harm. Do no harm. It's like thou shalt not kill.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I like to put these things together, because all these different spiritual practices, religions, the whole thing, they all kind of like, if you really step back and then take out the dogman person, this is my perspective, that there are certain truths which override every, all these spiritual things about how we view life. Okay. So the first two are these, these guidances, of self-study, of clarity, of not over desiring, these things that are positives and negatives, things to keep away from, which hold us back from feeling good and being clear. Okay. And then there's the asana. When you say, and most people think of a lot of people think of the practice of yoga as strictly the asana, which are the movements, about keeping your body healthy, about, making sure that your body is as strong and the energy centers of your body, which is the whole science of the energy lines that are, like thousands of energy junctions that are within your body, to keep them open and keep the juices flowing in every part of you, so that you can be as healthy and as alive as you possibly could be with the body that you've been given. And then there's the whole thing of pranayama. It's all the breathing that we can control. Our energy flows with our breath. So you can control the energy levels of your body. You can be driving in a car, at 1 in the morning on a long trip and be really tired and like say, oh my God, maybe I better pull over. Or you can do some breathing exercise, breath of fire. You could raise the energy level, or you can calm yourself down. There's a whole, it's all yogic science of using your breath which is the conduit of your energy, if you're conscious about that. And then those are the first four. And then the last four are different levels of meditative states, of focusing, of another level of focusing, of turning out all your sensory stimuli so you could just be still. And then gradual levels, gradual deepening levels of concentration, of stillness. And then this, where you're totally free from any kind of pull of this life, and you're just living in a state of clearness, of clarity. And in this clarity, anything could come in because you're not being pulled by the mind stuff. I mean, it's about when the first teacher who took all of these verbally communicated, things have been passed down for years and years and years by word of mouth. One teacher to another teacher, with people sitting on their haunches wherever they are, and they listen, and then like at some point somebody says, hey, maybe we better write this stuff down. So one of the great teachers, Patanjali, everybody pronounces it, a lot of people pronounce it differently, so Patanjali, and the Yoga Sutras. The sutras are the sutra means like stitches, like sutures, sutras, the threads of yoga. What are all the threads of yoga that are the tapestry of yoga? Okay, so this is how I understand it from my teachers and how I interpret it.
Okay.
So anyway, and he said that the yoga is the first one. The first steps is the stilling of the chatter of the mind, the stillness of the mind, and in that stillness, in this stilling of all the stuff that we are so much in our culture tied to, making a living, the relationships that we're in, the stresses of our political situation, this sociology, all the things, oh my God, I gotta vacuum the floor, I gotta go buy, I gotta, take the dog to the vet, that where our minds are constantly, but in the stillness of it, then magic happens.
Nice. Very nice. We'll be back right after a short break to talk more about this midlife hobby. Is there for the magic? Is that part of like for you? Is it part of the creative process, or if there and is yoga only for a creative type?
No, absolutely not. It could be for any person.
Okay.
I mean, here's an interesting thing that along the road. You know how when people get upset and you'll say to someone, okay, stop right there, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
So there's this huge wisdom here, okay, that, and where did that come from? Who said that? Okay, because the wisdom is that if you're really upset and you're like involved and someone says to you, okay, stop right here, just take a deep breath and be still for a second, and if you can, you can do that, you actually do that, all of a sudden you feel like it calms you down, and there's this like the temperature goes down a little bit, and then whatever it is that you're in a snit about, or is, like, or is really upsetting to you for some large reason, for that you're better able to be clear and take, instead of being swept away and be more and more upset. Okay. So that is, that's taking that very simple thing, and that's what yoga does as a practice of constantly bringing you back, so that, and why is it a practice? So that you get in the practice of bringing yourself back to the clarity and the stillness. And if you want to practice all the meditation things, which you can do that with more depth. Okay. So why? So that you can live a better life, so that you can, and so that when you're not on a yoga mat, you have all of a sudden more awareness to say, wait a minute, I'm getting all swept away. Let me just be still. And you don't have to say, Om Mani Padme Om. You don't have to do that. You can, and there are benefits to doing that. But you don't have, in the very basic, you could just be still.
Okay. All right. I know that you are a registered yoga teacher, and it very clearly shows in everything that you've been sharing and what you know. But I'm wondering, obviously, there was a point in time when you first started to the point you got to be a teacher. Are there any kind of like challenges, any bumps in the road, anything that made you say, I don't know why I'm doing this, or any, especially for somebody who maybe is thinking about starting it for the first time? I mean, is it likely that they could encounter some kind of bump, or has it just been smooth sailing?
No. Well, okay. For me, it's been smooth sailing because I was ready for it.
Okay.
But that said, I know that there are people who've said to me along the way, oh, I can't do yoga. Okay, no, I tried it. I can't do yoga. Okay. And so my experience is, and this is what I would recommend to you, Rob, because you're my dear friend, and I would like you to practice yoga.
Okay. I'm not flexible, though. We're clear on that, right? I'm not flexible. I understand there's more to it, but I'm not flexible.
So that is
See, I'm already in the wrong mindset, aren't I? I've got to go further than that.
Well, it's not wrong. We're a very, very judgmental society. It's your mindset, but
okay.
But it's an obstacle. You own that. Because it's not wrong. You sense yourself right now as not being very flexible. Mm-hmm. Well, if you never learned how to eat with a spoon, you would never eat with a spoon.
Okay.
So to the extent your body is built, let's just get to the flexibility issue. To the extent that your body is put together in the way it is for your age and the foods that you eat and the amount of sleep that you have, then you are, and the choices that you make in your life and your emotional state, that, you may be like hunched up in your shoulders and figure like, I can't do this, but with some practice, unless there's an anatomical reason why your muscles are a certain way, and that's true. There's certain, and men are built differently than women. So there's certain things that men have more difficult time because of their muscle mass, and women different. So, okay. So you're not necessarily, I'm not flexible. I mean, your flexibility is something which you can explore.
Okay, fair enough.
So here's the thing. In my experience, one of the obstacles of people like saying, I can't do it, or, I tried yoga and it was not for me. There are, in our culture in the United States, with the explosion of yogic experiences and venues where one can experience yoga, there's so many of them. Okay. So you can, if you just have one yoga experience and make a judgment based on one thing, then I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Okay. I mean, I experienced yoga, in a health club. That was my first experience of yoga. Okay. But within that health club, there were two different teachers, and because of their particular approaches, they did different things. They ran their classes, they conducted, they orchestrated their classes. And one had music, one didn't. One talked about this, one talked about that. One was more physical, more physically challenging, whatever. They're all different, and then there are different types of yoga. I mean, so within my advice is that you kind of like think of it as the fruit stand, and you try a plum and a peach, try a banana, and then you'll find for where you are in your life right now, who are the particular teachers, what is the particular style that serves you right now, and it will change, or it may change if you're open to like saying, well, let me try something else. I've done it. I mean, with the gym thing, and then one of my teachers opened their own studio. And then I tried it at a larger, strictly a yoga place, and that was, that I could walk to, and I didn't feel there was enough of the teachings that were involved. It didn't feel right for me.
Okay.
All my judgments aside, whatever it wasn't right for me. And then I found two places that felt like my yoga home, where there were teachers. Very different teachers, and they're different disciplines. One is a Kundalini yoga teacher, one is Ashtanga. One had a series of teachers that just one year she was an assistant for a yoga teacher that was, originally from Kripalu, and then he broke away and had his own thing, So there's just so much. So my big advice is that, not to jump, not to take it like this is that whatever you do, you're going to have, if you're very mindful of yourself and you listen to your body, that you don't force yourself to do anything, that you're, to shop around and see what feels good for you. Don't make a snap judgment. Okay.
And that kind of gets to one of the questions, was how to get started. I mean, because the idea again is, I don't know how comfortable I would be walking into a room for the first time with a mat rolled up under my arm and going in and trying to do it. I mean, you mentioned at some point that you wanted to talk about there's like different yogas, and how are there also different experience levels? Are there better ways to get started and enter for somebody like me?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I think about it, right now in this moment, as you're asking me this question, is if you know something, it's kind of cool if get your own yoga mat. Mm-hmm. And there are different thicknesses. If you're a longer person or a shorter person, you want to take it, if your knees are sensitive, get a thicker mat, and they're not that expensive, and you can always get another mat if it doesn't work.
Okay.
And, oh, by the way, there's a way to roll your mat so that you can make it be more sanitary for yourself by putting the back sides together and then rolling it up that way, than doing it this way, so that wherever you put it down, you're always putting the dirt of the environment on the part that you lay down on.
Is there a class for just the rules around the equipment also?
Give me a ring, I'll show you. Because I guess the other way for years, and I went in one class, and she said, here's a way to roll your mat. And I went, duh. That makes real sense. Okay, so if I was going to start all over again, I mean, I'm kind of like I'm not kind of like, I'm an experience. I dive into things. Okay. Mm-hmm. And as I explained before, I dove into it in the midst of the beginning of a huge multi-year journey of grieving. I was like, hey man, I took myself on a 5-day silent meditation retreat in the middle of the boondocks and this thing, when I had never done it before. A lot of people say, what? Like, okay. So, so I was practicing yoga was like no big deal. I was locked in the woods for it. Yeah. If you know somebody who practices yoga, say, hey, can I go with you to a class? Now we have the internet. I mean, poke around the internet to see, there's some, okay. So here's another thing, that it can be confusing to go at the beginning to a yoga class, depending on whether the teacher uses the Sanskrit terms or whether they use English terms. I use both in my practice because I love the sound of the asana. There's.
So you mean like downward dog versus there's another word for downward dog?
Yeah, downward facing dog. The term for downward facing dog is Adho Mukha Svanasana.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
Yeah, Adho Mukha Svanasana.
All right. There will not be a test on this at the end, right? Just promise me that. Okay.
You see, remember I told you there were the 8 limbs of the yoga? Okay.
Yes.
And the physical practices are called asanas. That's why at the end of each of the physical poses, it's asana. Shavasana, Malasana, Balasana, Adho Mukha Svan Asana. Okay. That's the construction. So it's like any language. It's this pose, asana pose, this movement. Okay. Here's the dog. These are the terms for downward facing dog. Adho Mukha Svan Asana.
Okay.
You break it down. And it's a beautiful language. It's one of the most expressive, and there's all sorts of spiritual opinions about how that kind of language is like it has a vibrational level that is cosmically in tune. You could get me started, but maybe we better have a glass of wine. Or sit on a mat with a glass of wine.
There you go.
So I think that, it can be very it's like any experience. If it's your first time or your first couple of times, it can be confusing. And chances are you're in a class where other people have been doing it for a while. So if you want to be confused, have an anxiety and want to, just then go on the internet and just say yoga poses and take a look at what they are. Basically in most classes, the end you're going to rest, the shavasana. But there will be a downward facing dog. Then there are the warrior poses, then there are the folds and twists, and they all have. So if you're at least familiar with some of the basic poses that are the basic asanas, okay, then you're not going to be quite so like, oh my God, what's happening here? You'll still feel a little bit like that because it's like anything. The first time you get on a bicycle, I fell many times and I still fall.
Oh, that's fair. All right. From a pragmatic standpoint, because I'm harkening back now to the purchasing of a mat. I mean, is there a big kind of financial investment to pick this up as a hobby?
It's like anything else. You can buy a pair of socks for, $3, or you can spend a lot. I wouldn't go. Okay. So for a person starting yoga, like anything else, you're experimenting with classes and teachers. So experiment with mats, look at what your budget is and get, mat, if you think that your limbs, your knees are sensitive, don't get the, they're like 1/8 of an inch and 1/2 an inch, then get a fatter mat, like give yourself a break. And then, listen, and you don't need to invest in a whole bunch of fancy clothes. I think one of the great things about the pandemic is that people are doing yoga and they can be visible or not visible, and they're wearing all sorts of it's not, you don't have to feel like you're in a class and you need to dress up for yoga. And a lot of people do. And listen, I did, too, like I have, special yoga tops. I got, a t-shirt and layers. It's cold in my house, and I'm, so don't make a major investment in equipment until you get the lay of the land and see how your body feels. Do you want to have some spandex on you, or you don't? You just don't want to have your legs up in the air and have, your and so that your pants are falling down on your face. It's a practicality. They don't, and I have a thing about hot yoga. Like I wouldn't start with hot yoga. I mean, the beauty of hot yoga, which I can't do and I will never do, is because I was a long distance runner for many years until my knees gave out, and I ran marathons, and I knew I could never do things in really hot weather. My body is not built for that. I feel like I'm going to faint. I have very low blood pressure. So I'm not going to do that. So, don't do this. So, okay. Bottom line is that don't, experiment with the equipment that you use. Get a mat that's within your price range. Get get something to tie it up. I like having a yoga bag so that, it's clean. You can throw it in, it's not getting polluted by other. I actually have this well, I'm a wardrobe person. I've got a wardrobe of dishes. I have a wardrobe of mats, but then I became a yoga teacher. So like I would have a mat for this studio and that place and that one. So it's like having the microbiome. This is the microbiome of this studio and staying there. And this is the microbiome of my hallway, with the cathedral ceilings where I teach and, in my studio. And then, so make a prudent investment and experiment. And then you say, and, pick a color of a mat that pleases you.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. That's helpful. That's very helpful, actually. I think the biggest questions are always, how do I get started? Do I understand? It's a gap analysis thing. So let's go back. We've talked before about business people, right? Gap analysis. Here's where I am today. Here's what it is I want to achieve. What are the obstacles that might keep me from getting there? What are the steps I want to take to actually get there? Right. And so, I think of it, a lot of people, when you're starting out on these kind of these journeys where you're trying to figure out what it is you want to do in anything, whether it's about a hobby or whether it's about your personal life or whether it's about picking a show on Netflix, it's still about like, where am I right now? And where is it I want to go? And for me, in this point in time, for me, and I think I'm not alone in this, at least I guess we'll find out, won't we? But, when you have a lot of personal change, and even if you didn't have it organically recently in the last 18 months, since the pandemic, you may have it forced upon you. There is a lot of change for a lot of people. So how do you start to manage that? And the change for me is now I'm in this environment and surrounded by walls that I'm getting tired of looking at. And I got to find something that will help occupy my mind, occupy my body, occupy me in a different way. And what do I get to do? And so you're answering all the questions that help me figure out if I'm ready, if this is the kind of path that will help me get to this objective. Now, the trick is whether or not people are really clear on what their objective is. And I don't know that I am either, which is part of the problem, right? So,
well, okay. So if part of an objective is, I think, let me think for humanity.
Okay. Let me know how that works out.
I'm kind of guessing that we all want to feel good in our skin.
That's fair.
We don't want to feel fearful. We want to feel loved. We want to feel safe. We want to feel, good. We want our lives to be good. And the yogic roots are about living a good life, of being in tune with the earth, with the forces of the universe, the harmonics, there's all different ways of looking at it, the harmonics of existence. Why do people feel good when they take a walk in the forest? Because they're in tune with the rhythms and energies of nature, it's like there in front of us. Okay, so the initial teachers, wherever they learned this from, whether it was experientially or whether an alien came down, or whether, whatever the great intelligence is of the universe gave them that wisdom, whatever it was that they knew that to be still and to be quiet in the midst of the struggles of survival on this planet as a human creature, that felt good. And some people were better able to do that than others, and they became teachers. But it's always about feeling good, about a way to live in harmony and goodness in your life. And we all, what do we want to feel bad? No, we want to feel good. Okay. So that's where, the sitting still, the meditative part of yoga. But then you say, well, listen, if I can't sit still because my body hurts me, then, what is it saying about that this being, this flesh that I've been given for some mysterious reason, why am I, this is who I am. This is how this body, this miraculous body that we had, that we're still in scientific terms trying to figure out how it works.
Sure.
We know a lot, but we don't know everything. Okay. Particularly in the heart brain, who's really in control here. That's a whole other discussion. So that's how to understand, okay, what can I do from a physical perspective to enhance my experience as a whole being? So that's how the asanas, because the first came the meditation aspect of it, the being still and being still and being in tune with, with the earth and nature and being open to whatever comes in that stillness. And then how do I how can I help my body to host me, to be healthier? That's how the asanas and the pranayams, came about. So, so these are yoga's meant on the whole thing to help us to live our lives with more goodness on different levels. So if you were to do even as little yoga as once a week, even from a physical perspective, without getting into, I need to any of the other stuff, you will be with a teacher that knows what they're doing, that you feel comfortable with. And it'd be good to have I mean, I could be, I just thought about this. I mean, I could be like a yoga counselor. Somebody can call me and say, here's my experience. What do you think? And I'll say, this is what I think. Okay, maybe I'll do that. I was consulting for all these years. Maybe I'm a yoga consultant, and I'm not, listen, there are people who've been doing yoga many years like that. I have no illusions about how I'm a big expert. I just know from my experience and how I'm a pretty insightful person. So, but anyway, so it's all about feeling good. Yoga, and I don't with a teacher that is skillful, with you being aware in your life about not pushing yourself to do something that hurts you, whatever. I think that I just think that only goodness can, and that's what the intention. And like it's the airplane on the ground. You can have a better way to speed around and maneuver around the fields of the airport, and then you can experiment with getting off the ground.
That's awesome.
I'm experimenting all the time. In teaching, I learn every time because it's my practice along with my students.
All right, well, I think you have given me everything I would want to know about at least understanding how to start practicing yoga, not doing yoga, practicing yoga.
Practice makes perfect.
Practice.
Although there's no such thing as perfection.
I was going to ask you about that. So now you have to reset my objective here. No.
Perfectionists among us.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, let's not set the unrealistic expectations. I like you're starting with at least once a week to begin with, and maybe that's a good way to go. So, all right, fantastic. Marilyn Zavidow, thank you so much. I love visiting the site, zavidowcreative.com, where you've got your Karma Cabaret up there, and you've got BizCom, but in particular, Yoga Z. Love the fact that you are a registered yoga teacher and have really brought a lot of great new ideas to me today. So thanks so much for the time. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. I mean, it's been good for me too. So that's what friendship and that's what yoga is all about.
Amen. Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out our Instagram page, which you can find at midlife_hobby, or follow us any place you can find podcasts, including Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And of course, when you find something you like, you should always tell a friend about it. Also, I'd love to hear thoughts and suggestions about other hobbies or speakers. Send an email to midlife.hobby@gmail.com. I'll do everything I can to follow up with you. Special thanks goes to Dorothy Draper for this episode's inspiration around hobbies. Dorothy Draper was an American interior decorator who liked bold, large prints and bright colors. She said, "The finest thing about a hobby is that you can't do any pretending about it. You either like it or you don't." Hope you'll join us next time for Wanted, a Midlife Hobby.